for peace and prosperity. And I want to talk about Iraq, but first let's talk about the general issues. The world's mad at us for a lot of reasons, you know. I mean, we said, yeah, this global warming is kind of a problem. You guys do something about it, we're not going to help. We said, we really don't want North Korea and Iran to have nuclear weapons. But we're going to be the only country ever to get out of the nuclear test ban treaty, and we're going to try to develop 2 of our own new nuclear weapons. I don't know about you, but that strikes me as a hard sell. I don't want you to have one of what I already have 1,500 of, and I'm doing my best to get 2 new of. You think you could sell that? I mean, I could go on and on. We even denied we were bound by the Geneva Convention on Human Rights, banning torture of people captured in combat, when our own senior military personnel were begging us to honor the Geneva Convention to protect our men and women in uniform. So, Hillary wants to say to the world, look, when we look out at the world and our big problems, global warming, terrorism, the spread of nuclear, chemical, biological materials, vast flows of illegal immigrants for human trafficking and what is little more than forced slavery, organized crime, narco-trafficking, the prospect of global epidemics. You think of all these things. There are none of these things we can solve on our own, right? They're all international problems. So she wants to send a different message to the world. She wants to say, America is back in the cooperation business. We're going to work with you whenever we can, act alone only when we have to. She wants to say, we are back in the diplomacy business. Diplomacy with friend and foe alike whenever we can. Military force will be used only as an absolute last resort, not a first option anymore. And in order to do all that, we have to get Iraq right. She strongly believes the time has come to bring our soldiers home. We just lost our 4,000th combat casualty. We have almost 70,000 wounded veterans. We have been there longer than we were in World War II. The Army are serving 15-month deployments, longer than they did in World War II. We have exhausted the ground forces of America. We have used the Army, the Marine Corps, the National Guard, the Reserve. Now we are training Navy reservists and Navy personnel in Army infantry tactics, and they are being deployed to Iraq. We have spent $600 billion, with at least $400 billion more to be spent. Now, no one wants Iraq to fail, and you shouldn't. You should want them to hold together and make it. But she strongly believes that it is imperative for America, right for Iraq, and right for the real war on terror against al-Qaeda to end our involvement in the ongoing military conflict and bring our soldiers home. And I want to be, in the spirit of full disclosure, I want to be as specific as I can about what her plan is. She would begin, assuming nothing changes before the next election, she would ask the Joint Chiefs to give her a plan to begin withdrawing the troops within 60 days, at a brigade or 2 a month. Contingent on 2 things. We have to take care of the 100,000 American civilians that are there and give them a chance to be safe, or at least they have to have a knowing decision to stay. And we have to take care of the Iraqis who have been allied with our men and women and who could themselves become targets for assassination. And I take it all of you would support letting them come to America. I must tell you, this is one of the things I really don't get about the current government. They're reluctant to let our people come here, those people. They've been very slow. But one of our daughter's best friends won the Bronze Star for Valor at Fallujah and liked to joke that he was the only Jewish Democrat captain in the Marine Corps. It wasn't exactly true, but it was pretty close. He's a wonderful man. And he told Hillary and me repeatedly that his soldiers would not have survived but for their Iraqi translator. You can't leave people like that behind. And I hope that whatever our position is on the Iraq War, we recognize our obligation there. So that has to be taken care of. Hillary would leave a small number of special forces, probably in the north where the Kurds are and there's no fighting right now, to counter the al-Qaeda if necessary, because they are the real enemy. They're the people that killed our folks on 9/11. They have killed thousands of people since 9/11, just not in the United States. They want a third war in the Middle East. They want to stop the Israelis and the Palestinians from making peace. If that could happen, it would take about half the sting out of the terrorist argument in the world. So she would leave them there. But otherwise, she believes we have to do this for the American military. I already described to you how spent they are. Their readiness levels in every respect are lower than they were the day I left office. We've got to rebuild the military. You got people reluctant to re-enlist. There was a story last week talking about the dramatic increase in mental health problems and family breakup problems when people are deployed a second, a third, or a fourth time. We have got to rebuild this. We can't do it. If you want diplomacy to work, people got to think we've got the best military in the world, and we always have had. We have just about broken them. And so it's the right thing. It's the right thing for the Iraqis, because if we do what Senator McCain says and tell them we'll stay 100 years, then they'll never make the decisions they have to make. What's the hold up there now? What's the hold up there now? They got to figure out how to split that oil money and how to share the political power. Don't you try to avoid making hard decisions before you have to?
No, how many times have you put off going to the dentist in that extra month or two? This is way harder than that. So we need to tell them we've got to bring our soldiers home. We'll keep some behind to help you with al-Qaeda, but you've got to get this show on the road. You can't do it. We're not doing you any favors by telling you we're going to stay forever. And the third thing is we need more troops to fight al-Qaeda. The Commandant of the Marine Corps, not somebody running for president, the Commandant of the Marine Corps said in the last 2 weeks, I know we need 3,500 more troops to save the moderate Muslim democracy in Afghanistan and to fight the al-Qaeda. And I will send them there, but I cannot leave them there very long unless you let me bring the Marines home from Iraq. We are spent. It is time to do that. Time to do that. Now, one other thing Hillary always asked me to say, we could save most of the $120 billion we're spending in Iraq, but not all of it. Because if you elect her president, she will never permit America to do what we did after Vietnam and confuse an unpopular war with our obligations to the people who fought it. We have got to take better care of these men and women in uniform. We have 70,000 people with everything from post-traumatic stress syndrome to traumatic brain injuries. They're all tested now when they come out for traumatic brain injuries under the bill she passed. And this is not something she comes lightly to. When we were in the White House, Hillary asked to be our point person to make sure every Vietnam veteran exposed to Agent Orange was taken care of. She has to be our point person to make sure that every veteran of the first Gulf War that had Gulf War syndrome got whatever care we could give them. This is a deep thing with her. And it explains, I think, why she got so much veteran support. But look, there are 200,000 homeless veterans today. Most of them are Vietnam veterans who had their generation's version of what we call post-traumatic stress syndrome. If they had had the GI Bill of Rights she wants to give these people, counseling, mental health care, veterans homes if necessary, job training, access to business loans, and comprehensive health care for a lifetime, a lot of that wouldn't have happened. You need somebody as president that cares about these people and will stay with them all the way through to the end. And let me just say this. You do not have to take my word for this. You can look at the record and ask yourself, don't you think it's amazing that the first woman with a serious chance of being elected president has the endorsement of 2 former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and 34 retired generals and admirals because they trust her to be the commander-in-chief and think she will be the best. And they're all for getting out of Iraq. It's not that they don't want to come home from Iraq, they just know you can't come home from our responsibilities in the world to fight terror and to our own veterans and men and women in uniform. You can't come home from that. That won't be there the day after tomorrow, no matter what we do. So, that's my second argument. My final argument, very briefly, is she's the best change maker. She's the best change maker I ever saw. And what really matters is whether you can take the good intentions of the campaign and turn them into positive differences in other people's lives. When we were very young and we met in law school, everybody couldn't wait to get out of law school. God, it was a pain. Going to school for everybody. Up our ears to death. Not Hillary. She stayed another year and worked at the hospital. Because way back then, there were no protections in American law against the severe abuse and neglect of children. We'd have dinner and she'd try to tell me about kids in the local hospital with cigarette burns in their arms, kids that hadn't been fed in a week, no protections. And that extra year, she used it to work with people to develop guidelines for new laws. Now every state in America protects children from severe child abuse and neglect. She was making changes as a young woman. And when we left law school, it was then a rare thing for a woman to be a law school graduate. Unlike now, when more than half of the graduates are women. It was damn rare. It was rare. And she could have had any job she wanted. Big law firms, clerkships. She went to work for a little bitty salary for the Children's Defense Fund, knocking on the doors of poor people's houses in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to find out why their kids were dropping out of school, and she discovered it was because almost all of them had minor physical or mental disabilities. The report she and her young colleagues filed led to the passage of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which guarantees an equal and appropriate public education to all of our kids without regard to disability. And I really believe that's one of the reasons she won such an enormous victory in Massachusetts with the entire political establishment against her. She came roaring home because they knew her, and they knew from the time she was a young woman, she was always out there trying to change other people's lives for the better. And then when I became governor of Arkansas, Hillary brought health care to people in rural areas that didn't have it. She supervised our school reform program, and it was ruled one of the two most successful in America by an expert who once said, my state had the worst schools in America. She started America's first rural development bank, using the very same techniques that got a man named Muhammad Yunus the Nobel Prize 2 years ago. She raised all the money. That bank still loaned money to poor men and women in rural areas to give them a chance to start their own businesses and begin again. That's one of the reasons she got 70% of the vote in Arkansas in the Democratic primary and is running 15 points ahead of Senator McCain in the polls. They like her there because they know her. And when she ran for re-election in New York, she carried Republican New York, the 40 counties that voted for President Bush last time, 60% of the vote because of the work she'd done in small towns and rural areas. I asked one of these grizzled Republicans why he was voting for Hillary, and he said, because she is the only public official who ever did anything for us. And I said, what do you mean? I said, it was a really Republican town out there. He said, I know, I never thought I'd vote for her, but I'm going to have to. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, all these other politicians, they come to town and make a speech and take a picture. They're just as nice as they can be, but nothing ever happens. When she comes, she sits in a room and listens to us. And we decide what we're going to do. She always does what she says she's going to do. And he said, you know something? About half the time something really good happens. I guess I'll have to vote for her. That's what you need in a president, to make something really good happen, and why you should support it. And every member of the Pennsylvania National Guard and Reserve deployed overseas now gets the same medical benefits for life that regular military personnel do because of the bill she sent. We now have a bipartisan majority in the U.S. Senate, bipartisan, to do something serious about global warming and do more buildings like this, because she and John McCain took reluctant Republicans all over the world and showed them how the planet was changing. She will work with anybody, go anywhere, do anything to move America forward. That's what you want in a president. Somebody who thinks about the impact of all this on you. So you've been so patient, I want you to laugh at the end. You should be for her because this is the way she'll be if you elect her president. I believe you'll have a better economy and more broadly shared prosperity if you vote for her and she implements her plan than you did when I was president. She'll be better. That's what I believe. And one reason is she will never, ever, ever, ever forget what you are like now.
And it's easy to forget. Look at the damage President Bush did to his second term by the way we felt about Katrina, right? And this didn't have this doesn't have anything to do with race or region or religion or nothing. We didn't care. All we knew was our fellow Americans were down there in the Superdome and they could not get water for 5 days. And it made us sick, right? The whole thing made us sick. Now, this is not a partisan argument. There are plenty of Republicans who have done a great job at FEMA, but they weren't part of the well-connected crew that got isolated in Washington. They voted for cronyism over competence. She won't ever do that. She won't forget you. You talk to any fireman in New York she fought for after 9/11. You talk to any soldier in the 10th Mountain Division. She won't forget you. And it's easy to forget you. It's easy to think you are somebody when you're president. Seriously. I mean, think what it's like being president. They play Hail to the Chief every time you walk in the room. For 8 long years, they played a song every time I walked in the room. I was completely lost for 3 weeks after I left the White House. Nobody played a song anymore. I didn't know where I was. Washington's a traffic nightmare. You know that if you've been there. For everybody but the president. He just zips along in a bulletproof limo. Don't even stop at red lights.
Oh, I see.
You don't have any commuting time to work in the world's most famous office. Every night you go to bed in America's finest public housing. Your airplane is so cool, people make movies about it. We're laughing, but you get the point, don't you? Wait. You get the point. It's easy to get carried away, but if you do, it can be a disaster. The president is nothing more than the most fortunate public servant on the face of the earth. That's all. And nothing more. Nothing more. That's the last thing I'll say. I never met anybody better at her than this. I never met anybody that had a better heart, that had more feet on the ground, that I trusted more to always be there for you. I literally wept this summer like a baby standing on the golf course when a caddy stopped me and told me that in his real life he was a captain in the New York City Fire Department who thought he was a Republican before 9/11 until his president told him that none of them could get sick because of what they breathed. You remember when they were working in 9/11 and what you saw? Asbestos, PCBs, and benzene, 3 well-known cancer-causing agents. This guy stopped me on the golf course. He said, your wife, my senator, was the first person who knew that many of us would get sick and some would die. And when the White House said no, she said yes, and she stood there and fought for us, and we got the help we needed, and some of us who would have died are alive. And he said, those of us who didn't make it, even we knew, our families knew that the Congress honored our service. He said, I know nothing about politics. I don't know what I think anymore, but I do know this. That's the kind of person who ought to be president. Somebody who knows what it's like to be me. And that's what I say to you. When all this is said and done, when it's over, think about how you'll know if the president succeeded. Think about how you'll know when it's over. Because I promise you, you're thinking about this now, and in future ways, it'll be over like that. You'll be my age before you know it. It'll be over. So I asked Hillary this question. You know what she said? I said, Hillary, if you get lucky enough to get elected, how are you going to know if you did a good job? She said, I will believe I did a good job if I can stay when it's over. The American people are better off when I quit than when I started. Our children and grandchildren have a much brighter future. And our country and the world are coming together instead of being torn apart. If you want the answers to those questions to be yes, let Pennsylvania say yes to Hillary. Thank you.